Hello, Service Grisach. Welcome back to the podcast. He is a bird. I am your host, Shelton, and I am here with my biggest brother, Patrick Shelton, which means we are doing captain to captain. Patrick, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Last time, this is our second segment or installment of our captain to captain series. It was actually an idea Patrick had, him being a captain in the U.S. Army, me being a captain for the Swagger Raiders 2 role, and talk about how football and our experiences within football have obviously continued to grow from my career since I'm still in football, and B, how Patrick has taken those lessons and applied them to not only his work life in the military, but also his personal life, being a husband and a father. So that was the root of the concept, and we got really positive reviews from the first one, which I was excited about because I thought it was a great idea, and I'm glad people agree. And for the first installment, we talked about consistency and how consistency can ultimately grow your craft. And learning consistency can be, and just going to work and doing, and repetitiveness, even when you don't feel like it, or even when it's not the ideal conditions, can completely change your life habitually. And also you get so much better and you grow at whatever it is that you're doing, and can be applied to anything in life. So this week's theme, which I'm excited to talk about because it's actually what I was most interested in when we were bouncing these ideas off each other, is today's theme is performance anxiety, or anxiety in general, and anxiety in life, which I think any athlete or any football player has felt or dealt with some sort of anxiety somewhere in their career. And most people have experienced anxiety in general, but specifically for athletes. Pat, where do you think anxiety comes from in a human being, and where do you think from human nature, why does anxiety exist, and why is it hard to deal with at times?
So I think, at least for me, anxiety came from, like, it's a fear of failure. Like we've been on teams long enough to where you are bought into the team. You have a commitment to the other players on the team, to the coaches, and you don't want to fail. Like, you want to go out there and you want to perform to your highest capability. And I think some of that anxiety comes from fear of failure. It also comes from the unknown. Like, think about when you can watch all the game film in the world on the team that you're playing. And, like, I remember when I was a defensive end in college, I was going against this All-American tackle against the college that we were playing, and, like, I'd watch him on film, like, man, this guy's gonna be really good. And then you're never really, it's kind of the unknown. Like, you watch all the film, but you never know what it's really going to be like till you get out there on the field. And when I say anxiety too, it's those pregame jitters, those pregame nervousness.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of did you hear an echo? Okay, sorry. I had some audio trouble there. I heard myself really loud in my ear, and that scared the hell out of me. Did you kind of touched on it already in experiencing anxiety in your athletic career and your football career? When you were playing a good opponent or lining up against a good opponent, where else in your career, like pregame jitters, was that something you really struggled with or experienced often?
Yeah, I mean, every game, I think for as long as I can remember, I would, we'd always have, like, a pregame meal, and I'd always remember, like, man, I should be eating a lot more at this pregame meal than I am right now. But I just remember not being that hungry, and it was a mix of anxiety, excitement. Like, you just wanted to get out there, and then you have it, and then the first play happens and it goes away. And so that was something I wouldn't really say I struggled with it, but it was something that it was there every game.
Mm-hmm. Have you felt something similar to that in life outside of football? Is there something that you've been anxious about or nervous about, or had a similar experience with that wasn't football like related or game related?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's just normal. you kind of said, I mean, it's part of human nature. And, as people that are competitors and people that, work hard to excel, and people that are successful, and people that have a goal, like there's always anxiety, whether it's about, I was nervous when I left for basic training. I was nervous, or I was anxious when I went to Ranger School. I was anxious. I still get anxious before I have to go into big meetings, and it's not like paralyzing or crippling, but it's like I'm still thinking about it. I was anxious before I had a kid. I was anxious when my wife was in labor. I'm not
Yeah.
like an anxiety driven person, but anxiety and it's a part of
Yeah.
life.
I'm not an anxious person either, but I think it's an emotion that everybody experiences. I
Yeah.
think the most, I'm sure it'll be toppled by when Lisa um, goes into labor. I'm sure that'll
Yeah.
be the most anxious experience of my life.
Yeah.
But up until this point, probably the most anxious I've ever been. I remember vividly getting to Paris. So long story short, I graduated in December 2013, and I took a plane to Paris, France, January 2014. And it was just kind of like, oh, I'm doing this. And I remember getting there, getting picked up by the team manager at the Temple, shout out Manu, and going to his girlfriend at the time's house. She didn't speak a lick of English. He left me for whatever reason. I had a whole conversation with her via Google Translate, uh, and like split a bottle of wine because that's the only way to cut the awkwardness. And I remember getting in bed that night, jet lagged, not knowing, I literally didn't know a single person in the country of France. And I remember laying in bed like, what the fuck are you doing? Uh, so that was probably the most anxious I felt. And it was just kind of like, all right, here we go. Here we
Yeah.
go. And so, but like, so everybody experiences nervousness, anxiety, it's come from fear of failure. Like you said, the
The
unknown,
unknown.
like, yeah, the
Yeah.
unknown, you just don't know what's going to happen. Um, what, how, how is a, how is football and being an athlete taught you or experience via your experiences taught you how to deal with anxiety or nervousness? And have you been able to apply that to life outside of football?
Yeah, so it kind of brings us back to our first point. We talk about consistency. There's things that we do leading up to game day, right? You watch film, you hit the weights, go to your team meetings, all that stuff, and all that stuff helps you to build confidence. It doesn't eliminate anxiety, but it helps you to build confidence. And for example, with my wife and I, thinking about when we were getting ready to have kids, there was some consistency that was already built into my relationship with my wife, up to the point to where we had kids. Like, we had a rock solid relationship. So when we had kids, yeah, there were some growing pains, some nervousness, but that fear, that unknown, the relationship that we had built consistently over many years helped us get through that time. And applying it to the Army, you're leading up to a deployment or a big time training event. Well, up to that point, like, you've been grinding, you've been exercising every single day, you've been lifting weights, you've been running, you've been doing ruck marches, you've been doing your live fire training, and you've progressed all the way to the point to where it's like, okay, like, now it's game time. And so, having built that consistency into your program, doing the little things right, will help you, kind of move past some of that anxiety.
Yeah,
Still going to be there.
I think that's what I fall back on. Um, every time I'm anxious before a game, or yeah, basically before games. And it just, I always think to myself, it's like, man, I've been here, I've done it. I've
Mhm.
ran this offense for X amount of seasons now. I don't know how many reps I have at these concepts. And it's just like you fall back on the fact that everything is rote memorization and muscle memory. And it's just like, I've repped this, I've repped this, I've repped this. I've been in this scenario before. I've done this before numbers of times, and just go out there and do what you do. And it kind of, it's an inner monologue in the back of my head, because it's true. Like, I think repetition and consistency, which is what we talked about in the first theme, can help you deal with pregame anxiety or anxiety or fear of failure, because you've succeeded at it before. You've done it and succeeded at it before, because you've been consistent at your craft. You've broken the how to say it, like the barrier of success, because, or how to no longer had a losing mentality. Like, I've been in a lot of losing programs, and it's really hard to get through, because yeah, you can put in the practice reps, but if you haven't had the consistency and the repetition of succeeding in games, you're always going to be nervous, and you feel like you have to be perfect, and it's just not true. So now that I've experienced success in my career, it's almost like anxiety goes away, because it's like, I've done this, I've been here, I've done this, I've done this before, I've repped it a million times. But that helps anxiety for fear of failure, right? But fear of unknown, I think, is a completely different thing, because maybe consistency and repetition isn't as effective there, because with that stuff, like my point of view would be, I've played football a million times, but and I've reps out chevron thousands of times, right? So like, I've done that. It's in my bones now. So it's not the fear of unknown. It might be the fear of failure, but I know I've been there. I've done that. So like, when you came across something like basic training, or uh, your lovely wife Cherise having a child and going into labor, that's something you can't really prepare for. Like, sure, you were doing PT and stuff like that, but you had no idea what you were getting yourself into at basic training. And how there's only so much you can do to prepare to become a father. So it's like, how could you handle anxiety, or what have you done to be able to cope with some of those things, with the fear of the unknown, which I think is probably more difficult than fear of failure?
Yeah. So a big part of it is just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just showing up. Like, you show up with your training, you show up with your skills, and you show up, and like, to your point, you can game plan in a game like all you want, right? And sometimes the plan just goes out the window, and it's like, okay, like, we are not messing with that plan anymore. We're going to go do this. And so, there's a saying in the Army, there's two plans in the Army. There's the one that might work and the one that won't work. And so I think it's going to get into a conversation for another segment of this,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also building a mindset through day in and day out. You're building a mindset, and to me, it's like this I can mindset. Like, I learned. So I'm going to go kind of off topic a little bit.
Okay.
We're talking anxiety. Okay. Some of the most anxious times I've ever been in my life, forget a deployment, forget Ranger school, forget base training. Some of the most anxious I've ever been is when I was working in the bar and I was scared of getting the shit beat out of me.
Patrick was at post college. Patrick was a bouncer for multiple years there, for a little while. I guess a year
or so. Time. I mean,
yeah, it was longer than it probably should have been.
Yeah, but I remember standing there many times. I was always tucked off in a corner or whatever, and I remember looking at the crowd, being like, holy shit! Like, there is a weird mix of people here, and if there's a fight that pops off, like, I'm probably gonna get my ass kicked. So then there was like this fear, like, I'm gonna get my ass kicked, right? But then like, I started training, martial arts, and got some more confidence about my abilities to handle myself in that situation, and the times that big fights did break out, like, you never knew what was going to happen in the fight. And then I ended up getting in a few fights, and I had won, kind of like talking your, like you kind of got used to a little bit of success, and that kind of helped quell the anxiety a little bit. But I think it was just this keeping this mindset that like, hey, I'm trained. Like I've been here before. I've been in some hairy situations before, and that I can do it. And I think that kind of gets into maybe another segment of this.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think another aspect is like you got to prepare for situations as much as humanly possible, even if there's situations that are almost impossible to
Yeah.
prepare for. You just have to in some way to build some sort of confidence, which I think you're right. That could be a completely different segment. But I think the other thing is that football has done, and I know in my career I've unfortunately experienced more than I would have liked, is just failure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when you go
Yeah.
into a scenario, I mean, obviously that could help the fear of failure when you know how to deal with it, but it also helps the fear of unknown because it's like no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay, or
Yeah.
we're going to be okay, or we're going to
Yeah.
figure it out. Because I think a lot of people who don't play, I mean, every athlete experiences failure, right, in some way, shape, or form. But I think the thing with American football that's unique is that first of all, there's this physicality of the sport that some sports don't deal with. And it's like, not only do you get beat, you get physically beat, right? Like another human being physically beats you at something, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's you're trying to run them over and it doesn't work, whether they just blindside block you. Like every American football player has had their time where somebody has physically beat them, which is a different dynamic than being slower than somebody, which is
Yeah.
less skilled than somebody. It's a different dynamic. So there's this combination of physicality in the sport and physically being um, physically failing as well as schematically or skillfully. And there's also this dynamic of failing within a group and like being able to experience failure with other people and watch how other people deal with it and realize that no matter what the scenario is or how bad a sense of failure is, everybody always comes out of it, or at least at the most time. And
Yeah.
sports, obviously, losing a game or, even worse, suffering a catastrophic injury, like which is not terribly uncommon in American football, unfortunately. Dealing with these types of failures or setbacks, especially the injury portion one, you watch people overcome and you kind of learn how to roll with the punches and realize everything's not going to happen like a storybook
Mm-hmm.
ending or a storybook tale or fairy tale, and sometimes it's just going to suck and things are going to happen that sucks, like an injury, like a huge defeat, like not getting beat out for your position. There's so many competitive ways to fail within the sport and so many dynamics of it. I can imagine that prepares you for multifaceted as challenges in everyday life as well, and maybe that'll help curb some of this fear of the unknown.
Yeah. And so that, I just made a correlation here as I was sitting here. It's like, okay, so, usually, if you have a game on Saturday, usually like, you know, Thursday or something, we used to work like the 2 minute offense. We used to do, certain down and distance scenarios, much as I'm sure the same way that
Yeah.
we did. We used to do pass under pressure as if our defense is, trying to stop them from driving down the field. And so you're essentially practicing like some worst case scenarios,
Right.
right? And so I made this correlation between, when I was at U.S. Army Ranger School, they are training you in different kinds of environments under total physical duress, and they're challenging you for the worst case, or they're training you in the worst case scenario. You're tired, you're hungry, you're cold, you're wet, you're miserable. I mean, I'll admit there were nights that I cried myself to sleep for no reason at all. Sitting,
I'm sure there was plenty of reasons why.
going head first into my sleeping bag with my feet hanging out the bottom. Like, I don't know. Um, but I think through those, experiences in those trainings, like you learn kind of to what you said, if you're the quarterback that's trying to take the team on the game winning drive and you throw a pick, right? Everybody
Happens.
everybody saw it. And at Ranger School, if you're in a leadership position and the patrol doesn't go that well, everybody knows it was you. And I had to redo numerous phases of Ranger School, and there were people that went straight through 62 days, never had to redo anything, and it was like a just easy peasy experience for them. I was there almost double the amount of time that I should have been, but I think through all the times that I failed at that course, I think it made me better, it made me stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it was very public. So you kind of, and in some ways you kind of get over yourself and you kind of realize like, hey, it's okay to fail because I learned more because I failed. And you also learn, hey, I can repeatedly get kicked in the balls over and over and over. And then when it comes time to perform, I can still perform. And I think, as a football player, if you're as a defensive player, you run 70 plays in a game, right? And I remember you used to get like a plus or a minus for that play. Like, hey, you did your job, and then you got a minus if you didn't do your job. A lot of times it would come out, I'd end up getting more minuses than pluses, but I arguably had a good game.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think about like a quarterback. Like if a quarterback completes, 50% of his passes, like, man, he had a good game.
Mm.
Well, I mean,
yeah, it depends how they need to be really good completions. Then.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but the plays where I got checked a plus, I had a sack, I had a tackle for a loss, I had so there's plenty of failure that happens even throughout like a football game. Like, you don't win on every play.
No. There's games. There was a game against the Grouch Giants at home, I think 3 years ago or so, and their quarterback just came out slinging it. I think he had 400 yards at halftime or something. And my first pass was an interception. It was just like, oh, here we go, and you just gotta, it's not my first interception and it won't be my last interception. You just gotta fucking just keep winging it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's a perfect thing to end on is, everybody experiences anxiety. Anxiety is normal. The fear of unknown, the fear of failure is normal, but consistently working at your craft and preparing yourself for these scenarios is going to help you deal with this anxiety and always build this confidence or mindset, which you talked about, which we can expand on in another episode. And also just learning that failure isn't the end of the world, and that if you get blindsided and knocked the fuck out, if you get an injury, which every American football player has been injured, if you get a setback physically, you got to rehab and get back on the field. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen again, but it might mean it happens again, but you can't be scared of it, Mm-hmm. And lastly, when you combined the confidence, the preparation, and the self-confidence to deal with failure, then those three things can really help you deal with anxiety as a whole in probably any facet of life. Mm-hmm. Patrick, thank you again. Always a pleasure. Patrick Shelton, Captain Shelton, some would say, some have to say, I assume. Otherwise, they get sodomized. Is that how that works? Okay, sorry. All right, sorry. Yeah, they're probably screening this. So, Patrick, thank you very much. We will pick it up again. I think every 2 weeks or so, maybe around then. And I think it's funny that we found our next topic just in the middle of this one.
Yep.
So,
all right.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.